For many, many years, I've been using a line. It's a theory, however you want to refer to it. The left always overplays their hand. No matter what the subject, even when they might actually be right, even when they might be able to convince you, they overplay their hand. They always go to such a level of extreme that it's not credulity. That's not the word I'm looking for. It's bat crap crazy. It's just nuts. And they lose whatever advantage and they lose whatever goodwill has been created. Now, luckily for them, since they own and control media, it doesn't often affect them overwhelmingly, but it affects them enough for people, certainly like you and me, and certainly like independents and moderates, to dismiss them. But what happens when they go the other way with something? What happens when they decide that just because they don't agree with you, you're MAGA, you're an extremist, you're taking away women's rights? Do those things, when they go over the edge, do they actually work to a positive with independents and moderates? And one would assume that they believe that it does, because if it didn't, why would they keep doing it? Guys, welcome to the show, presented by Americans for Prosperity, americansforprosperity.org, economic liberty and free speech. I'm down with these things, and I live in Indiana, so that's why it's AFP Indiana. They're good folks. That is good folks right there. That is Ed Morrissey of hotair.com. You should check out his work over there. And of course, his book, Going Red, which is about how you win elections. I didn't want to dig in on check out this video, check out this story, check out this other thing. I wanted to dig in on what the political left is doing to Speaker Mike Johnson. Now, whatever we think about the election of Speaker, we can get into that, Ed. But it was less than 24 hours since Mike Johnson of Louisiana gets the unanimous vote from Republicans, which nobody, like the Spanish Inquisition, nobody expected on any single level. And it was less than 24 hours before you literally had the talking points disseminated amongst the usual suspects of Adam Schiff and Ayanna Pressley and all the rest. And it was all about the tearing down. Was the left not prepared for the right to actually vote for him, or did the left really have to do research because they didn't know that much about him?
Well, Tony, might be a little bit of both. I mean, I'm not sure that anybody had Mike Johnson on their scorecard as the potential, winner of, House Republican Survivor Edition, right? I mean, I don't think anybody would have picked Mike Johnson as the guy who would come out on top in this thing. I think that they're probably more prepared for Jordan. They're probably more prepared for Tom Emmer, for that matter. It's certainly Steve Scalise, because Steve Scalise had been the number 2 guy in the Republican leadership hierarchy in the House. So, yeah, I think it may have caught them by surprise, and they may have had to go back and do a little digging. Same thing is true for the media. I think that they were kind of caught by surprise. And one of the reasons why Mike Johnson probably got unanimous consent or unanimous support for this position is because he hasn't been a leadership guy. He hasn't been on those types of front lines. And so he hasn't had the opportunity to get crosswise with any of the factions within the Republican conference. So all of that is sort of like having it's kind of like a dark horse candidate would be in a presidential race, and people don't really vet them too much. And all of a sudden they pop out and at the very end and end up winning the whole thing. Especially if they're coming from what's seen as outside. And I think in terms of leadership anyway, Johnson was an outsider who was able to convince everyone that he would at least give them a fresh start. Plus, I think after 3 weeks, everybody was just tired of it and wanted to get it over with.
Look, I like Mike Johnson. I'd been talking about Mike Johnson as a possibility, and certainly timing has a lot to do with everything. And while there are people who are thrilled with Mike Johnson, there's also a situation that is very real that this party had enough. They had to come to grips with someone. Might as well be Mike Johnson. Never mind the back and forth of all of you who doubted Matt Gaetz's plan. See, we told you. Wait, you told us Jim Jordan. You told us Jim Jordan was the plan, but there was no plan, and that's another debate for another day. This is about the attack mechanism. Mike Johnson's response to Sean Hannity last night was, "Give me a chance." But that's not what the political left does. The alternative effect from trying to convince people that Mike Johnson is a bad guy is the left showing that they aren't even interested in trying to figure out how to govern together. All they want to do is be on the 24/7 attack, which was most seen from Hakeem Jeffries before introducing Mike Johnson as the winner. It was a disgusting display.
Yeah, it was really classless. That was a really classless moment. That was an opportunity to try to rebuild some bridges. Mike Johnson, I mean, the same thing is true of Mike Johnson in terms of the relation to House Democrats, as it was House Republicans. Mike Johnson hadn't done anything to alienate anybody, which is one of the reasons why he ended up getting, again, unanimous support from the House Republicans in that election. So it was an opportunity, I think, to reset a little bit and then offer an olive branch or two to see if they could actually get a few things done in this session, which is going to be very, very difficult. It's going to be very, very difficult for anything to get done because the narrow majority that Johnson has. And let's not forget that House Republicans are now trying to kick out one of their own, George Santos, which means that it's going to be a slightly narrower majority.
They might not be wrong in kicking out George Santos.
I think they're on the side of the Angels here, Tony, on that. I'm just saying, though, the outcome of this is that it's going to get slightly narrower, that margin of error.
But I want to share with you, this was the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, on the day Mike Johnson got elected.
We faced adversity on September 11th, 2001, when the towers and the Pentagon were unexpectedly struck, killing thousands of lives in an instant. We faced adversity right here in the House of Representatives, when on January 6, 2021, a violent mob of insurrectionists, incited by some in this chamber, overran the House floor as part of an effort to halt the peaceful transfer of power.
This is exactly what I'm talking about, Ed. Talking to Ed Morrissey of hotair.com. The left always overplays their hand. None of this was necessary. Never mind that they want to keep talking about January 6th, but comparing it to September 11th in the same breath is an insane thought.
Yeah.
Does this do damage to them with independents and moderates who they may very well need on election day, whether it be House races or presidential?
I actually think that nothing that's happened over the last 3 weeks is really going to have much of an electoral impact. By actually getting the House back in order, and this is going to be a blip, and I will relate it to this. When Ted Cruz, did the government shutdown in October 2013 over Obamacare and some other issues, that was supposedly going to be the end of the Republican chances in 2014 because of the disruption, because it wasn't really over anything it wasn't over anything that was going to be substantive enough to explain it. And it also stepped all over the failure, the disastrous, catastrophic rollout of Obamacare. Remember when all the websites crashed, nobody could sign up. I mean, and it allowed the media to divert attention from that catastrophe onto, it's a government shutdown, it's awful. And people were saying, we've screwed this up. The Republicans have screwed this up. Well, 13 months later, I mean, the timing is almost exactly the same. 13 months later, Republicans won. I think they flipped 8 or 9 seats. I think they flipped 8 and almost got 9 in the following election. I see these as blips. I don't think that what Hakeem Jeffries said on the floor of the House is going to have anything. I don't think anybody cares. People see this as Beltway nonsense. They don't care. They don't care that Jamal Bowman, basically did his own little one-person insurrection by setting off a fire alarm. I mean, some of us care, and we've talked about it, and we want to see him treated the same way as some of the nonviolent J6 people. But in the end, nobody's going to base their vote on that. Well, I do think the left has another issue coming into this, which is what's going on college campuses over the last 2 weeks, with the left coming out full throat in support of Hamas. That, I think, is a bigger issue to them than anything that Hakeem Jeffries is saying on the floor of the House this week.
it's not that I don't want to get into the conversation about the
Right, yeah.
full embrace of anti-Semitism. And when I say that, I do mean it, because they won't excoriate members of their own party, whether it be Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib. And I'm not one of these people who wants to see censure of Rashida Tlaib. I want expulsion. I am very clear. I will apologize to no one for it. But I want to go back to whether or not this has an effect. I do not disagree that maybe this speaker battle doesn't have an effect. But what you heard from Hakeem Jeffries is what you hear from the political left and have for the last 3 years, and you will going into the presidential election.
Yeah.
They must believe that it resonates. In my own Indianapolis, there's a mayor's race. It's happening just in a couple of weeks. And the Democrat, the incumbent who's been there for 8 years, who's running for a third term, his name is Joe Hogsett, is running ads against the Republican Jefferson Shreve, tying him to the NRA and Donald Trump. That's the entire campaign. They believe this works. The question is, based on your assessment as you're watching things, does it?
Well, I think it did in 2022. I mean, really, honestly, Republicans underperformed in 2022, in large part because Republicans allowed Democrats to make it about 2020. And not just allowed Democrats to make it about 2020, a number of the Republican candidates were making it about 2020. And I think that, plus being unprepared to discuss abortion in a contentious political climate, created an underperformance issue, which is the reason why, Kevin McCarthy only had a 5-vote margin all year long, and now Mike Johnson may end up with only a 4-vote margin going forward. So yes, I think they feel it works, and I think that they believe it did work last year in the midterms. And I mean, this is. Political battles are often like war battles. You keep using the same strategy until it actually fails, and you go looking for another strategy. They see the MAGA Donald Trump thing as a successful strategy against Republicans. I'm not even sure that they're wrong about that, but they're not going to stop using that until it actually fails for them.
Talking to Ed Morrissey of hotair.com. So now you've got Speaker Mike Johnson, which, for the record, I'm more than fine with.
Me too.
No issue there at all. Can he lead, and will the GOP follow?
Yeah, that's a good question. It really is. I don't know. I mean, it really depends on the decisions that are going to have to be made, because, I mean, the issue here, nothing's really changed other than the name over the Speaker of the House office. You still have a 5-vote margin in the House. Democrats still control the Senate. Democrats still control the White House. You can't dictate outcomes from the House. If you had a 50-vote margin or a 100-vote margin in the House, possibly, but if you'd gotten that kind of a margin, you probably have control of the Senate as well. And Republicans had an opportunity to gain control of the Senate, and they blew that in the midterms. So as a result, you can negotiate. You've got some leverage to negotiate on things like budgets and that sort of thing. But I don't think that they're going to get any outcome that's substantially different than that they were going to get a month ago, based on who was in leadership. You still have to deal with all the same headwinds that Kevin McCarthy's did. I will say this, though. First off, there's been signals from the Freedom Caucus that they were going to be a little bit more generous with Johnson than they were with McCarthy, because I think they just didn't like McCarthy. This really, I think, is mostly a personality issue, right? They like Johnson, and I think that they're willing to go with Johnson. So I think that the Republican cohesion may be better after this point. It has been a problem all year long, and maybe it's a little bit better after this. However, I will also say this. Kevin McCarthy was a fundraising phenomenon. Tom Emmer was a recruitment phenomenon. They did a great job in those roles, and that's really the biggest two roles that those guys, that the Speaker of the House, leadership, right? I think the real issue isn't going to be Republican cohesion. I think they're basically throwing in with Johnson and saying, "This is it. We're just going to do this the rest of the session." I think the bigger issue is, can Johnson step up and fill the gaps that they have created by pushing McCarthy out of leadership and forcing Emmer to go back to just being a whip? That we'll see. He may end up being a dynamo in those areas, but those are the areas that he's going to have to prove himself in. And if he doesn't, then I think the question won't be so much this session of Congress, but what happens in the next session of Congress, what happens in the next election.
So that brings us to what is first for the Republicans. What will show this faction, that faction, the other faction, America, that these people can actually do the job. What's first, in your view, should be for the Republicans?
No omnibus bills. That's the first thing. No omnibus bills. And bear in mind, McCarthy was saying no omnibus bills either. He was trying to do CRs to extend the time so that they could get the individual appropriation bills through Congress, based on the previous agreement that was made on the budget levels. But that's got to be the bottom line. Nobody wants omnibus bills. Nobody wants that type of process. And so if they can do, if they do a CR to January 15th or April 15th, but they do still get the 12 appropriation bills as part of the regular order that we do, that is supposed to be normal budgeting, then I think that that's a win for Republicans. And I think that it will satisfy all of the different factions. But if somebody floats an omnibus and it gets by on Democrat votes, man, Katie barred the door, because it's going to get bloody in the next leadership conference.
That much is true. Ed Morrissey, hot air, Doc. We gotta get more into it, but I'm up against it. It's me who's up against time today. You go back to doing whatever it is that you do. My thanks to Ed Morrissey. My thanks to you. I have like 12 more questions. I have 14 more areas to get into, but I can't get to everything all the time. It's killing me. I just got to start live streaming the show and be done with it. What am I wasting my time for? It's getting ridiculous. Guys, can't thank you enough for being here. And my thanks to my sponsor, Americans for Prosperity, AmericansForProsperity.org, economic liberty, free speech. Those are the things. Find the chapter near you. They're in your state. You just got to find where they're doing things and then go join them. Like in Indiana on November 8th, we're doing a debate party. The cigars, the bourbon, it's on me. It's on them. It's on me. It's on us. It's on we. And then we're going to, give commentary during the debate, because the debates, it's going to be weird. So that's happening in Indianapolis. If you're near the area, stop on by, get and reserve right now. Just follow me on the socials, Tony Katz on X, or go to TonyKatz.com and get all the information. And I will catch you next time, guys. That's all I got. That's it. You take care.